so other families understand the type of situation that you took. You and your husband had talked about this, and so you knew that he would want to do something like this. Were you surprised about the time frame or the quickness that all this could occur?
You know, that's the other part of it. Most families, we don't look for an accident. We don't look for a sudden death. We're usually in such a state of shock that, it is just really hard to sit there and think and do. And I tell people, talk about it. This isn't a real good subject, to come at dinner time. It's not a real, let's talk about organ donation today. You just don't do that.
Sure.
So at a quiet time, get out your little pamphlet that says, show me your heart,
Let me see this.
Go to the...
Be a hero, show us your heart.
Yep.
This is the new campaign, I take
This
it.
is the new campaign letter that's out, yes. Her sister had died, and this person received their organ. And it's Be a hero, show us your heart. That's all is in that new campaign out through the Secretary of State's office, yes.
Now, the gift of life, you donate your organ or your loved one's organ. You knew your nephew who received some of the bones, but have you met the other recipient of your husband's eyes?
His corneas? No.
Corneas?
I know that 2 men here in the state of Michigan, 2 different men got his corneas. That's still a very private thing. It has to be that if I had donated an organ or whatever, you have to write a note to the Gift of Life. They then pass it on to the donor or to the recipient.
I
yes.
see.
And the same thing, if the recipient wanted to know who the donor was, they would have to write to the Gift of Life, and the Gift of Life would then pass it on to the donors. Yes, they would.
Okay. Now, in the Everett area, then the hospital really acted as the Gift of Life, the organization that helped you walk through all these steps.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can convey to the viewers on what kind of different steps that you went through so people aren't as scared or nervous about the kind of things that happen?
Anymore they've got so many programs out that show you so many of these things, and sometimes some of these programs they give the wrong message. But everybody tries, no matter how it is, everybody tries to do their best, whether they do what you think is the best. But in my case, because when I called the Gift of Life and I talked to them on the phone, they apologized for asking me all these questions. And I didn't know at the time that, they're just basic questions that they ask you. They want to know about what kind of medication they take, and just informational stuff so that they could find the right person for the right organ or the right tissue or the right corneas. They do all this stuff afterwards. They go in and they do all this checking and everything. But it's not an easy decision when your loved one's there and you have to make the decision to pull the plug and and let the loved one. But the loved one has to be brain dead and on a respirator. That is the part that I think most people have got to remember, that's what you have to do. You have to be brain dead and on a respirator.
Now, those individuals that received the tissue or the bones, the one you know very well.
Yes.
That's your nephew, correct?
Yeah.
And you brought a picture of your nephew. I think you have a picture here of, this is your husband, and this is your nephew. How old is he?
Timmy is now 40 maybe.
And do you want to maybe just describe real briefly for the audience? You said he received some of the bones.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Timmy actually is, he was a hunter and a fisherman. We own property over in a hunting property. We're hunters. I hunt too, in Luther and Leroy area. And Timmy used to come up. Timmy had a disease that made his hips, he needed a new hip and a new pelvic. And I don't know a lot about bones except that bones are non-denominational. Anybody can use bones. When they go into quarantine for 90 days, they take these bones and they're basically used for infants. Yeah, and they can take bones, they crush bones, they implant them, and they do not need blood to grow. So bones will just adhere to anybody. So Timmy was always one of our favorites. He's the age of one of my sons, and Timmy, we did a lot of hunting and fishing with Timmy, like I said, and so it was just that Timmy and I have always been close, but we're even closer now that I know he's got some of Bob's bones and
Sure.
and whatever else.
And he's a nephew.
And he
So
is.
Would that be
yes.
on your side or your
My
son's?
husband's side.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't make a difference.
Okay.
Anybody can use bones. Now this picture that you're actually showing here, Timmy and I were invited by the musculoskeletal transplant, big words, to go to the Rose Bowl parade 2 years ago.
Oh.
We went there and we rode on the float. It was only the second year that the Gift of Life had a float. And while we were there, we met many other recipients and many other people who had been who were donor families and recipients. The one family that we did meet, she had been in the Columbine shooting in Colorado. And she had told me her story about how the shooter had a shotgun and had shot off her shoulder. And she's a beautiful girl. And she said that she got bones and tissue and muscles and tendons and veins,
Wow.
all the types of things that my husband had donated. So just because you can't give an organ, that's a heart, a lung, a kidney, intestines, I forget the other one. There are still, you can give so much more by being able to donate. Heart valves are another thing that tissue people like me could give. Tissue, that's considered tissue. So we had a good time while we were there, but it was wonderful to meet a young gal that had been benefited by the types of things that we had donated from my husband.
Sure. Now you're going back to your nephew here. He received some bones actually from your husband.
Yes.
And what did it repair?
His hip and his pelvic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it made him to stand?
Oh yes,
better?
he had already lost like 2 inches. He was,
Uh-huh.
he'd walk like back and forth. One side had already gotten 2 inches, and they had to put some in his hip and redo his pelvic, and he just snapped right back from it. And there's a lot of things they do with bones now too. Bones, instead of putting in the steel rod, they can actually take bones, make them look like a screw, and screw in. Bones can actually be screwed right in.
And do they grow from
Yep,
other bones?
yep.
Huh?
They adhere. I don't know how, but they do. They adhere, and like I said, they do not need blood to grow.
Now, your nephew, how old is he now? He's a couple years. Has this been a couple years since
This is, let's see, this happened 8 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
he was in his 30s then.
how long, when you give an organ as a donation, and it goes to some place where they store it or wait for a recipient, like with bones, do they have a longevity of how long before they're not useful?
They go into quarantine for 90 days, so you can't use them for the first 90 days. And after that, I think it's a shelf life of like 2 or 3 years. Don't hold me to it.
Sure.
But they are basically used up within that length of time. And the transplant group did tell me that they will go back to the area where they came from. They won't necessarily be used in New Jersey like I thought maybe they
Sure.
would be used.
Now, the Michigan Donor Family Council, something that you're volunteering on. Can you talk a little bit about that organization or that council? How is that important for citizens here in Michigan?
Well, I'm actually on the advisory board, but we also have a Michigan Donor Council, all separate from them. What we basically do is we go out and we give talks to people. I am the donor wife, so I am not looking for someone to get my organ, to get an organ from me. I want to be able to tell people, it's wonderful. wonderful to know that you've either saved a life by organ donation, or you have helped someone to overcome something that he might have used a prosthesis, or instead of actually having a bone or a valve for something. So what our mission is to go out and just tell people to be aware, talk to people about organ donation. We provide support systems unique to donor families. Donor families have other things to think about. The recipients, they've already received it. I'll bet you know of somebody that's had probably a heart, lung, or a kidney.
Yes.
And do you know anybody that's been a donor family?